My name is Martinez, and I'm a LALS graduate student in the Latin American and Latino Studies Department here at UCSC, and the topic of my presentation is In Search of Decolonizing Representations, Learning from Indigenous Visual Media in Oaxaca, Mexico. So my overview includes my preliminary research description, notes on the work conducted, research questions and theoretical frameworks that I potentially see myself working on for my dissertation. So I think it's important to ask why I am interested in visual indigenous representations. I'm partially interested because there's a huge media censorship of indigenous peoples in Latin America, particularly by mass conglomerates such as Televisa and TV Azteca. We don't really hear enough stories coming from indigenous groups. We don't see them really being reflected in commercials or TV shows such as telenovelas, or if we do, it's in degrading, essentialized ways. And despite of this, there's an existence of indigenous media collectives that have existed since the 1990s, such as Chiapas Media Project and Coordinadora Audiovisual Indígena Originaria de Bolivia, and Ojo de Agua Comunicación in Oaxaca. I strongly believe that visual media can be an outlet of expression that helps understands how community struggles are interrelated. It's definitely something that we can see as having a transnational impact. So a lot of problems that communities have in certain areas can be applicable or understood in other areas. And I think it's important to also ask, or actually, sorry, I'm going to first work on my research description and talk about what I did in Juchitan. I was in Juchitan, Oaxaca, which is on the Isthmus of Tehuantepec, and I was in Oaxaca City. I was there from June 20th to June 27th, and I was there because I was completing a language program, a Zapoteco language program through San Diego State University. So it was a 5-week program where I attempted to learn Zapoteco because it was a pretty difficult language for me to learn, even though I do have Zapotec heritage. I created a list of contacts, I made a lot of observations, I conducted informal interviews, and during my time in Oaxaca, I was searching for counter-hegemonic representations of resistance. And so I think it's important to ask what I mean by representations of resistance exactly. So I was looking for several things. One of the things that I looked for is that I looked for ways in which indigenous groups affirm their existence. I looked for ways that they create spaces in which they have been rejected or excluded from, representations and stories that Televisa leaves out. I also looked for ways that indigenous groups invalidate their languages and promote unique cultural traditions. I looked for ways that these communities complicate provincial differences, so not just ways that they have, that they show that, so resistance to centralized representations, basically. And I also looked for ways that they practice concepts of communality. So how did they value exchanging knowledge within themselves rather than seeking profit? And lastly, I looked for ways that they resist ongoing issues affecting indigenous communities, particularly structural inequalities such as violence, patriarchy. And please note that I do not mean to generalize all indigenous Oaxacans or Juchitecos. I look at the select groups and individuals who practice resistances. Moreover, I do not suggest that indigenous groups that practice counter-hegemonic expressions practice every resistance that I mentioned. There might be an artist that may promote, indigenous language, but might not necessarily have things of structural inequalities in their work. So yeah, I just wanted to make a side note of that. So before I talk about what I did in Juchitan, I think that it's important to talk about Juchitan itself, where the location is. Apart from being the site where my language program happened to take place, Juchitan really, in my opinion, was a great place for a starter like me to venture out and look for, representations. Historically, Juchitan has been a city of resistance. Juchitecos proudly boast that they resisted the French in 1866. I talked to several people and they would just, tell me a little bit about the history of that. And according to several people that I talked to, they have more recently resisted transnational companies, including fast food chain restaurants, wind turbine companies, movie chain theaters, from establishing their businesses in the heart of Juchitan. And this is something that I noticed. There's not really a McDonald's or a Starbucks in the center of Juchitan, even though Juchitan is the second biggest city in Oaxaca. The one chain restaurant that I saw was Burger King, and it wasn't really at the center of everything. So I think it's important to notice that. Also, Juchitan is a city with indigenous success that has been known for having indigenous activism. The COSE, which actually I have an image of COSE activism right here. The COSE is the Peasant Student Coalition of the Isthmus of Tehuantepec, serves as an example of indigenous activism. It was the first socialist municipal group to win elections in Mexico. And in 1981, Juchitan was the first and only city with a government that was both leftist and indigenous. And besides being a politically active city, it's a city rich with culture. I already was familiar with Juchitan before I went there. I saw Marlene Gosling's famous documentary, Blossoms of Fire, and Aaron McGenesis' also a documentary, Dos Patos, Mexico. So it wasn't really hard for me to find a cultural event going on. It was difficult to make decisions about what to attend, and because my classes were held at La Casa de la Cultura, I was constantly aware of everything. So there's two sites that were particularly useful for me in my research, and that was La Casa de la Cultura and Foro Ecológico. And La Casa de la Cultura is a cultural center, and they have workshops, film screenings, they host meetings there, and they have exhibitions. I was able to attend a few of the film screening and observe a radio comunitario meeting also, so that was pretty great. And also the Foro Ecológico was a great place to meet people. It's a community center that promotes environmental awareness, and it basically grew out of this need to preserve a really important river in Juchitan called the River of the Otters, and that was basically becoming really polluted in the 1920s. So this Foro Ecológico is a space that provides free swimming classes, language classes, painting workshops. There's a collective called Colectivo 21 that works there. They have they offer free painting workshops, which I really was surprised and amazed by how many free activities there could be. And there's also Sing and Proof that meets there. So I'm going to talk about what I found. How did I see counter-hegemonic representations through artwork, music, and visual expression. So in Juchitan, there was a Biku Yuba collective exhibition going on, and Biku Yuba means angry dog in Zapoteco. And it's an art collective that produces urban street art. In their bio, this is a translated bio because it was in Spanish, says the conceptualization of the work comes from dialogue and participation of the collective. They work with themes that include irony and irrelevance towards popular Mexican and universal icons. So here we see, indigenous Oaxacan representations instructing popular images. It produces humor, but also allows people to think about the raciality of pop icons. And here we see Marilyn Monroe's being Oaxacanized. Monroe's face is replaced by Francisco Toledo, a famous Oaxacan artist. The act of replacing a popular icon with a lesser-known iconic figure conveys resistance in a way. The resistance practice here is that of incorporating an artist of color and indigenous descent into pop culture. And here we also see Benito Juarez, who I think is Benito Juarez, replacing the face of Indio, which is a famous beer label in Mexico. So I guess the original Indio beer label is kind of this essentialized idea of an Indio, and here it's a specific one. It's Benito Juarez. And then here we also see Benito Juarez being dressed up as a John Wayne-esque cowboy, and we know it's Benito Juarez for sure because he was known for taking care of sheep. So yeah, that's kind of how I interpreted it. There's also a big music scene, rap music scene going on in Juchitan. I was only able to meet two rap groups, or at least get acquainted with their music. One of them is called Badu Bazendu, which means rebellious boys in Zapoteco. And they're a politically conscious rap group. They rap about transgenic porn, censorship of the media, and violence in Juchitan. And there's also another rap group who I was able to see and check out also, that's called Huchi Rap. I haven't listened to their music too much, but the song that I'm gonna play a music video of their song, and it really promotes Zapotec culture. So yeah, we're gonna try to check it out and hear it. Hopefully everybody can hear it. non-Spanish speakers. I'm going to try to talk about what the song means a little bit. So the song La Joie de Papa, which means my heart beats, is an ode to Juchitan. The song captivates youth's desire to celebrate their Zapotec heritage and preserve traditions so that they do not fade and disappear. And indeed, in the music video, one can discern their heritage. They proudly rap in Zapoteco first and then translate what they have stated in Spanish. They explicitly describe how proud they are of being Juchiteco despite Juchitan's humidity and lack of activity. They describe the celebrations and traditions. Using monochrome shots, scenes are displayed throughout Juchitan, including the Central Market, Calle 5 de Septiembre, the San Vicente Church, and the Municipal Palace. These black and white scenes freeze central locations in Juchitan and make it seem as if Juchitan is part of the past. The video edited fading effect shown when the rappers recite their lines conveys the Juchi rappers as ghosts of the present. These ghosts speak to Juchitecos. They take Juchitecos to central locations so that they can remember the Juchiteco splendor. Interestingly enough, this music video was directed by a photographer named Francisco Ramos, who I was able to meet. He's a photographer, but he also produces, he also makes films. And yeah, so now I'm going to talk about the meetings with the local artists that I had, what we talked about. So unfortunately, I wasn't as prepared meeting Francisco Ramos as I wanted to. It was the first time that I had ever really tried to think of doing informal research and asking, having an intention of not just talking to someone about what their interests are, but with intention of being an academic. So it was a little bit nerve-wracking. I wasn't ready, but we did become acquainted. I was able to support him by attending events that he invited me to. He introduced me to painters and musicians and other photographers, so that was really great. And we're friends on Facebook, and I've been following his Facebook page. This is actually a picture that he took. Yeah. And I also met Jose Manuel Valencia Toledo. I was a little bit more prepared to meet with him. I met with him at La Casa de la Cultura, and during our meeting we discussed several topics, including his profession and the films he made. He made several films about the history of Juchitan. We talked about my research interests, the Zapoteco language, the history of Juchitan, and TV Juchiteca, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. So according to Mr. Valencia Toledo, he dedicates himself to video recording social events, including Las Velas, weddings, and other parties. He does not dedicate himself to making videos about social causes or injustices per se, but rather documents the Juchiteca cotidianidad, the everyday life in Juchitan. I was also able to informally meet visual artists because I attended this seminario on cinema alemán, and it was an event that was hosted and sponsored by a Cine Club en Juchitan and the Goethe Institute. And the Goethe Institute is a big organization in Germany that promotes cultural exchange between Germans and people outside of Germany. So I was able to meet a lot of filmmakers from Mexico City or from Puebla or from all over Mexico. There's also the Juchiteco filmmakers present. And during 2 days, I listened to them talk about film licensing issues. I observed them working on a programming exercise. I was pretty shocked that I was there with them just because it was the first weekend that I went to the event the first weekend that I got there. It was unexpected, but it was great. I didn't realize that I basically met a lot of people. I looked them up and I realized how great they were after, and so now I'm just hoping to meet them again somehow. So the topic of cine comunitario social was brought up throughout the seminar. Based off my understanding of the conversation, the concept promotes the notion that filmmakers can make films about their communities and for their communities. This doesn't mean that filmmakers are dismissive about the idea of sharing their work with others. They value cultural exchange, but they also prioritizing their film to their communities and seeking feedback from them before showing it to other audiences or screening it at any major festivals. So there's also, as I said before, I was also able to talk about TV Juchiteca with Mr. Valencia Toledo. Mr. Valencia Toledo, I talked to one of my relatives about meeting being able to meet with Mr. Valencia Toledo. And my relative let me know that Mr. Valencia founded a TV channel called TV Juchiteca. So when I met with Mr. Valencia, I asked him about what TV Juchiteca programming consisted of. And he let me know that it included a news broadcast that was accessible as a public access television station in Juchitan. And the program it started in 1990 and it ended in 2007, even though that's a little bit different than what I've been seeing. I believe that based off the YouTube clips, I have the impression that it has lasted longer. I was able to, so I still have to clarify, maybe I misunderstood Mr. Toledo, but I was able to watch these videos on YouTube, and in one of the episodes that I might just play a few minutes of, because it's an hour and 11 minutes, it's really long. So in one of the episodes about the news broadcasters talk about the need to preserve Zapotec traditions, acknowledge local heroes, artists, musicians, and raise awareness about issues affecting their local communities. So I thought that maybe we could just play a minute of that. And once again, I apologize to the Spanish speakers. There's no subtitles, unfortunately. So that's why I'm not going to play for it too long, because it doesn't have as much, visual imagery as the music video.
Por cultura y cultivo del ser humano, de las facultades intelectuales del hombre. Ello incluye las costumbres, la manera de ser, los rituales, las vestimentas, las formas de comportamiento. Incluye nuestras tradiciones como un conjunto de bienes culturales que se transmiten de generación en generación dentro de la comunidad zapoteca. ¿No es así, profesor Reyes?
Sí, en efecto, yo creo que esta es una labor loable, altruista, en verdad, y con la finalidad, sobre todo, de volver a mostrar esa identidad que poco a poco se ha ido perdiendo del pueblo juchiteco. Es por ello que estamos haciendo este esfuerzo, insisto, de llegar a todos ustedes, pero al mismo tiempo para que también ustedes coadyuven a que esto avance. ¿Cómo es posible esto? Bueno, a través de una página de internet y al mismo tiempo un correo electrónico que vamos a poner a disposición de todos ustedes. Nos podrán ver a través de la página web www.zapotec.
All right, so basically what they're saying is that they have a strong urgency to preserve Zapotec identity in Juchitan, and they're just explaining the beginning of the episode that they plan on using the episode or the TV Juchiteca as a medium to encourage that preservation of the culture. And they were giving also, they're sharing their email and their website of that. And yeah, and I will show more of it, but it's a little bit too long. But it does talk about, I think later on though, they do go into the community and interview people. So I would also like to say that I didn't just conduct or think about my research while I was in Juchitan, but actually I thought a lot about my research after I left Juchitan, and that was primarily because once I got the list of contacts of people, I was able to look them up and look at their films, which internet wasn't too accessible to me in Juchitan as much as I liked. So once I got back to the United States, I just looked up these people, I checked out their films, and I spent a long time watching the films. And there's several films that particularly I thought about. I thought a lot about Luna Maran's Me Parezco Tanto a Ti. I was actually able to meet, Luna Maran was at the Seminario Alemán, so she's one of the examples of the people that I was just, after I saw her film, I just was like, wow, I can't believe I missed the opportunity to know her, but it's nothing that I really could have done, really. And also, I was able to see Ángeles Martinez La Tiricia, Como cura la tristeza, and it's on Caballeros Trujillo's Atempa. And in my opinion, these films do indeed practice the indigenous resistances that I talk about. The representations in the films are historically situated, the filmmakers worked with their communities, and to me, the messages in the films resist structural inequalities, specifically gendered constructions. Maran's documentary, Me Parezco Tanto a Ti, conveys generational dreams. Elderly, middle-aged, teenaged, elementary school-aged females describe what they accomplished in their life and what they would have liked to accomplish. Some elderly women describe the little options that they had in terms of choosing their relationships and their careers, yet they also describe what they enjoyed in their youth. Young women or girls describe their dreams that do not necessarily consist of getting married or having kids. Martinez's fictional short film delves on the issue of generational abuse or historic trauma. I'm still trying to figure out what concepts I want to use. It's important to note that none of these women in the film directly tell each other what happened to them. Instead, the scenes in the film show audiences what happened. This technique might have been employed to demonstrate the pain and embarrassment it might cause for individuals to directly talk to one another about the past. The flashback of the past reveal the traumatic memories for them. Yet, these atrocities are not told detail by detail. One does not know the exact nature of the harm or violence committed. Nevertheless, the filmmakers convey perpetual cycles of abuse. And the discussion between the grandmother, mother, and a daughter in the film is a way for generations to interconnect and heal from their trauma. And this is actually a still from the film. And Atempa similarly deals with the issue of structural gender violence. The film is taking place in San Blas, Atempa, which is in the Isthmus of Tehuantepec, not too far away from Juchitan. The film is about this, it's kind of like, well, it's about this about this child that, is born a boy or whatever, and he embraces his female identity. So he dresses like a girl, he listens to Selena, he dreams of having a big quinceañera, or she dreams of, or they dream of having a quinceañera, and yeah, they, throughout the film, his story is also interrelated to another, I think what they call in this is they want the mujer story. So one can notice the trauma homosexual men have acquired in the film. So the research questions that I derived from looking at the films and thinking about them include: what traumas have Oaxacan indigenous groups experienced over time that filmmakers convey? How do filmmakers depict the structural causes of these traumas? How do the filmmakers convey indigenous communities' resilience? How is cultural memory a form of resistance, and how do indigenous communities perform cultural memory and generational trauma in contemporary films and documentaries? How do filmmakers and communities work together to share intimate stories? So those are a lot of research questions that I'm thinking about. So hopefully I can, focus on a set of a few, or, condense them in a way. And a few theoretical frameworks that I think would be particularly useful for me would include cultural memory. Diane Taylor and Macarena Gomez Paris use cultural memory. To me, it explains how communities experience trauma and heal from post-conflicts and or systematic structures of oppression. Diana Taylor acknowledges that the body is a way of communicating knowledge and resistance. According to her, resistance doesn't always have to be verbal. And whereas Diana Taylor talks about how cultural memory can be performed, Macarena Gomez Paris provides examples. She discusses the usage of cultural memory in the form of visual art and performative practices. In the context of Augusto Pinochet's dictatorship, Gomez Paris argues that Chilean exiles, artists, and citizens used cultural memory as a way to understand torture, murders, and disappearances. So the purposes of cultural memory that connect to this notion of resistance is that it encourages citizens to utilize their own ways of remembering without relying on dominant epistemologies. It incites rebellion and contests dispowerment, and it acknowledges the importance of communality. And lastly, the other two topics that I think would be important to also, or frameworks that I think would be useful for my research, include cine comunitario. I was able to pick up a website that talks about cine comunitario, but I also know that other scholars have talked about this, such as, I'm blanking out on her name right now, but I definitely know there's several scholars that have talked about this topic. And generational trauma would also be another important framework for me to use. I would especially be interested in looking at how this framework has been used by Native American scholars, and because I definitely see the links between, indigenous communities in Latin America and North America having to face colonial violence. So these are a few of my resources that I used. And Erica Cusi-Wortham was who talks about cine comunitario as a framework. But yeah, so that's it. Thanks for coming.